G'day from Rootstech. Last year in Australia we had a great big conference, our Genealogy Congress. And one of the speakers at the Congress was a guy from Salt Lake City representing Familysearch. His name was Dan. I was sitting in the Family History Library earlier this week when I saw this great big smile and I thought, I've seen that fellow before. His name badge was turned around the wrong way, so I couldn't confirm that it was actually the Dan from Adelaide. So when he came near me, I said, "Are you Dan?" And Dan Poffenberger said, "Yes." I said, "I met you in Adelaide." So I snagged Dan for an interview. So good morning, Dan.
Good morning.
And I'm interested in the man behind the talks in Adelaide.
Oh, that's a big question. I could talk, as you know, for a long time about that. But right now I'm working in the Family History Library. I work on the British floor. That's, for those of you who haven't been there, it's the second basement floor. So you're actually two basements down. I like to say there are fewer windows than a Vegas casino, but it makes some people uncomfortable with that reference there. But you generally have no sense whether it's day or night, so you could stay there forever, really. But I help patrons who come in and they have questions about their English, Scottish, Irish. I would say mostly English and Scottish. In fact, for the whole library, about 10% of our patrons ask English questions. It's the third most common country to have questions about.
So what's the second most common country? I can guess the first.
Yeah, the first, obviously, since we are here in the United States. The second is Germany, actually. About 11%, and then England at 10%. And don't ask me what it is after that.
I'm not going to. So how long have you been hanging around the library?
I've actually been an employee, well, hanging around the library since 1989. I was 10. I'm just kidding. It feels like it, you know. I can't believe it. Since I just became a grandfather, actually, in October. I like to say my wife and I were 13 when we started. Yeah. Because obviously, you know, can't be that old, but time flies. It was 1989. I had just finished at a junior college. Had taken some family history classes. I mean, my story goes back earlier. If you were in Adelaide, then I talked about my grandma Poff, who took me to a family history center when I was 10. And so that's really what kindled my love of family history. Then when I went to Ricks College, it's a little college in Idaho. It's now called BYU Idaho. I promised my mom I would look up this I looked up this girl. I had no idea if she was cute or not. I was a little bit nervous, I'll say that. But I knew my mom was going to ask me about it. And so I went and looked her up, and not only was I in trouble when I saw those blue eyes, but she was in a family history class. And so that's why almost 25 years later now, I'm married to that girl, and I have a job in family history.
So it's a bit of a dream job.
So absolutely. I never thought I could have a job in family history. I was finishing up at the college and getting ready to go to BYU to finish up. The college was a 2-year school, so going to get my 4-year degree. And I started working as a genealogical researcher for one of the companies here in Salt Lake, and taking on client work, basically. And so I started that in 1989. I did that through my graduation in 91, and really up through full-time through 93. But it's not an easy way to make a living. And my family was growing.
You need something regular.
3 children in, absolutely. So even though I knew nothing about investing, I didn't know what a mutual fund was. I got a job with an investment company in town, and it was a good job. I actually did that for 9 years, and so as I was into it 3 or 4 years, then my research tailed off as I started to earn a little bit more money at that job. And so really from about 98 to the year 2000, I didn't do very much. And then the tech bubble crashed and I just started doing, the overtime dried up and I started doing research again in 2001 or so. And then in 2002, the company had layoffs and I wasn't laid off. I was asked to take a different role within the company. They took a quarter of my group and just laid them off outright. I was in the next group, mostly because I enjoyed talking on the phone too long with clients. That was exactly. So I was in that next group, and I fully planned on staying and taking the other role within the company. It wasn't a pay cut or anything. And what happened? My wife and I started talking about it, and for us, it was actually a matter of prayer, and felt like I should come back to family history. That was really where my passion was, and where I should be. And it was the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. I had 5 children at that point. Yeah. In the Family History Library, a research consultant, a full-time paid employee, had not been hired in over a year and a half. And it took me, so I left, not knowing if I would even have a job. I took a project, and even when I took the first research project, after that, I sat at the desk in the library and thought, I can't do this. I'm going to go back to the company and tell them I want my job. Yeah, and say I'm going to stay. So I called my wife and told her, and she drove in. So she's very important to my being where I am today. But it took 2 years. I got hired on as a temp in the British floor, and then I was hired on full-time at the end of 2004, back into the British unit. So as far as the library goes, I'm coming up on my 10th year, I guess.
So there aren't many paid employees, are there? It's down on B2. Most of the people I'd come across would be volunteers?
Correct, yeah. A lot of volunteers. As far as paid employees go, I would imagine 12 or 13, which might seem like a lot, but when you're covering a full work week,
it is, yeah.
And you have different responsibility besides answering patron questions.
Yeah, I was going to ask, what sort of things do? You have a different team for cataloguing, etc. But what other sort of roles? I know you came to Australia. Did they send you out talking to other places much?
They do. I'm always looking to talk in places. I love to teach. And I think most of us who are in the research consultant role, we do it because we love helping patrons find ancestors. Yeah. So we spend part of our time on the desk.
Yeah. Oh, you do? I was wondering if typically a researcher talks to one of the volunteers and then it gets escalated through to you if it's too difficult. Is that what happens? Or? That
can happen. For example, although unless it's an Irish question, usually those come straight to us because those are almost always difficult. There's no such thing as an easy Irish problem, really.
No, yeah.
But normally I will spend on any given week around 10 hours on the counter answering patron questions. We also have the way we consider ourselves really is we're the genealogical expertise for the family history department.
Okay.
And so whether that means that expertise is needed helping patrons who walk into the library, or it's helping patrons who ask for assistance in other ways.
Online?
Online, certainly. Self-service, i.e. the Familysearch Wiki.
Yeah.
We also have this issue of having our research consultants retire periodically, of course, although it tends to take a while, hence it took me a while to get a job. I was the first research consultant hired in about 3.5 years when I was finally hired on full-time. So
you don't have a lifespan, such as I went on a choir tour last night and I learned that people can only be in the choir for 20 years. Can you be at the library for longer than that?
I sure hope so. I'm planning on it.
Yeah. Now, I want to touch on one of your other interests. The first talk I went to of yours in Adelaide was really good, wonderful, on old handwriting.
Yeah, I love. It's one of. Actually, I could have a full-time if I could, I would take a full-time job reading old documents. Obviously, secretary hand in particular.
Yeah.
But I love, it's one of my favorite, when a patron comes up and they have a document to read,
yes,
then I tend to ignore everything else because it's my favorite thing to do.
So you give a lot of, so would you be classed as an expert in that, in the library, or you hide your light under a bushel? Or no, everyone knows.
Well, I mean, I've always liked to think that I've always been proud of how humble I am, and no, I mean, I was.
Is there anyone else with that expertise in the library?
There are others who are good.
Oh, okay. But you're pretty good.
I'd like to think I'm pretty good at it.
That's great.
For a while, I spent about the last 5 or 6 months. I couldn't keep up the time commitment really, but I was teaching the BYU, Brigham Young University, independent study course for Old English handwriting, History 421. Okay. I just stopped doing that at the end of January. Yeah. But I loved grading papers. It just took a long time because I was pretty. Yeah. I won't say I was nitpicky, but I was pretty detailed in how I wanted the transcriptions. Yeah. So. But
it's great to get feedback like that from a marker, isn't it? Yeah.
So I hope so. I received a few compliments, which I appreciated.
That's good. That's good.
On the feedback. So absolutely, I love teaching that class, and I love reading old documents.
Okay, so on the British floor, you're a British expert. That doesn't count Australia, does it?
It does, actually.
It does?
We don't. I'd like to say we get a lot of Australian questions, but I would imagine of the British questions we get, as I mentioned, England by far is our top country, followed by Ireland, then Scotland, and then Wales, and then would come the other countries. Australia, I would say, would be next, followed by New Zealand.
Yeah. That counts with the population. So if someone in Australia wants help from the Family History Library, they can ask for that online?
They can, yeah. Certainly you can submit a question online. There's also...
And what happens with that?
That question will go into a queue. Actually, I would suggest asking the question on Facebook as well as any. Claire in our unit, Claire and I believe Alan does some of this as well. Okay. They specifically are tasked with watching Facebook to answer questions there.
Because there is an Australian group, Family Search group on Facebook.
Yes.
I think,
And we have had forums, but forums were recently taken down. I'm sort of disappointed, actually, because I thought I'm disappointed in the fact that I thought it was a nice way to get a question answered. But Facebook seems to serve the purpose.
Yeah.
So.
And how about the Wiki?
And then the Wiki. The Wiki is where a number of the consultants spend a lot of their time. So as I mentioned, when we have consultants retire, like Dee Richards in our unit is retiring next week. And he's been with the department for over 30 years. So he's acquired a lot of knowledge.
It's a lot of knowledge.
And when he leaves, unless we try and capture it in some way, that knowledge is gone.
Gone, yeah.
And so the Wiki is one of the ways.
It's a growth area.
To capture it, yeah. You know, the thing with the Wiki, and I think I mentioned this in Adelaide, and it's going to be true probably forever, is that in some ways the Wiki is great. Yeah. For example, I've realized that I don't know that I would do an English probate search without consulting the Wiki. Because everything that you need to understand jurisdictions, to know about online indexes, to understand how to order the right film, it is all there. On the other hand, there are other aspects of the Wiki, say for England or any place, which are still severely lacking.
Yes, I think Australia needs a little help.
Absolutely. Yeah. But it'll get there. It's a community effort. And so people just, whatever your experience, what I like to say is whatever your experience has been in the past, when you go back, you may still have that experience, but on the other hand, you might find some incredible information.
That's great. It's interesting. There was a speaker from America, Paul Milner, in Adelaide recently, in Sydney recently, and he suggested that whenever we found anything, we used the Family Search. We should use the Family Search Wiki as our personal guide and place to put our notes.
Really?
So that would help
Yeah.
other people. So,
Absolutely.
Yeah. So that's a good idea.
I think the battle there. Yeah, Paul's a
Yeah.
great guy.
Yeah.
I met him in Alabama at the institute
Yeah.
that's down there.
Yeah.
That's absolutely true. I think the struggle that we have a little bit as genealogists
Yeah.
is that as soon as we go to a page and we see a box,
Yeah.
we focus so much on names and putting our name in the box to see what the results are going to be.
Yeah.
Almost like spinning a wheel, or that we tend not to look at the other resources available. An example of that for me would be Scotland's People, which is a great, as you know.
Yeah.
It's certainly for the British Isles, but I would imagine for any country, they have done just a tremendous job of digitizing records.
And it's cost effective.
It is, yet there are other resources there that you go to, and that give you help on on handwriting, on terms that you're not familiar with. There's some great resources, help resources there that people tend to ignore because they're so busy putting in names in the box.
Yeah.
And I think the Wiki suffers that way a little bit. But.
Yeah, it can give you a background. Well, look, I think you've told us quite a bit about yourself and about the Family History Library, and I personally just want to thank you for coming to Adelaide and sharing your knowledge with us down there, and thank you also for what happens in the Family History Library. It's just been so valuable to a small bunch of Australians this week. We really appreciate that access to all those films. It's like Aladdin's Cave, and to the helpful people. So I hope you'll go back and express my thanks to your team.
Absolutely.
On behalf of all the people who've travelled up from down under.
No, absolutely. It's our privilege.
We've enjoyed it so much.
It's like a dream job.
It is a dream job. You're very lucky, blessed.
Yeah.
So thank you for chatting with me.
Thank you, Jen.
Thank you.